Okay, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Again, my name is Nathan Dean. Thank you for attending. We have a new branding. We're calling it the BI Washington Policy Pulse. So, a little bit more fancier name to it than the Bloomberg Intelligence Financial Policy Weekly Call, which I personally liked because I came up with. But we're going to go with Washington Policy Pulse. For those of you who haven't attended these calls in the past, I know we picked up a lot of subscribers last week in the wake of President Biden's decision to not run for re-election. These calls are designed to last around 8 to 10 minutes just to give you a flavor of what's going on in Washington, and then we send you back to your day. If you do have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat. Otherwise, you can email me directly at ndean10@bloomberg.net, and we'll make sure that we can go ahead and get those answered to you. But again, it's designed to be a fairly quick call. So what do we have to know about for this week? Well, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on Vice President Kamala Harris or President Donald Trump, but other than the fact that it seems that the Democrats are still moving forward with this idea of a virtual roll call to solidify Kamala Harris as the presumptive nominee before the election, I'm sorry, the convention in Chicago in late August. Now, what this is this actually has to do with the state of Ohio. State of Ohio had a rule that you had to have your nominees in place by August 7th. The Ohio legislature actually passed that a law pushing that back to September 1st. And while I'm not a lawyer, there's still a lot of ambiguity, and some folks in the Democratic Party want to have that virtual roll call done just in case to get some of this across the line. I would note it's probably going to be likely that the VP selection would be announced in conjunction with that, just because if you're going to do it for the presidential nominee, you probably want to do it for the vice presidential nominee as well. And, Bloomberg News actually just put out some reporting over the weekend that it's really come down to three candidates: Senator Mark Kelly of Arizona, Pennsylvania Governor of Josh Shapiro, and then Minnesota Governor Tim Walsh. So, we'll see. I can see scenarios for all three of them, and I can see scenarios of why you would pick one or the other, but, we'll see what happens. So definitely stay tuned to Bloomberg News, but don't be surprised at that virtual roll call. The process does take a couple of days, so you'll see some headlines associated with that. So let's turn to Congress for a little bit. So the House actually left last week. This was a week early. They weren't supposed to do this, but they were working on the appropriations process. And if you attended one of these calls a few months ago, we talked about this at length. And if you remember that there are 12 appropriation bills to keep the government open past September 30th. And the House of Representatives has only been able to pass 5 out of the 12. So there are still 7 out there. And Speaker Mike Johnson had even said that he wanted to have all 12 done before the August recess. Now, look, I don't think anybody was truly anticipating that. I don't even think Speaker Johnson was truly anticipating that, but it was a goal. Unfortunately, there was just a little bit of hiccups going on with that process. So Speaker Johnson made the decision to just end the session a week early, and everybody headed to the beach. Now, what does this mean? Well, for one, it means that if you're in the ESG space, that House Financial Services Committee hearing that was supposed to be tomorrow, that's been postponed. But secondly, it also means that September has become a much more the right word is maybe much more important month. It was always going to be important. I'm trying to figure out the best word here. But anyway, September is going to be about preventing a government shutdown. Now, if all 12 of those bills are not passed by September 30th, you have a government shutdown. Now, look, the threat of a government shutdown in an election year is extremely light. We're putting it as a 10% chance because nobody wants to be seen shutting down the government 1 month before the election. And so, but also don't be surprised if you see a little bit of headline risk, maybe a flirtation, if you will, with the government shutdown. And I'm just going to use this opportunity to state that Gina Martin Adams, our chief equity strategist, and I have a note that we dust off almost every single time we have a government shutdown threat. And the idea here is that there really is no threat to markets, even large contractors and look, if you're a contractor and you work for a small contractor and you don't get a paycheck, that's a big deal, obviously, but if you're a large government contractor and you're trying to model out cash flow, for example, a lot of these contracts that come from the U.S. government are 18 months, 24 months, even longer in space, and the cash flow can certainly survive a 2-week government shutdown. So we don't really see a lot of impacts on that. The only major impact is really for certain traders who use reports like Federal Reserve reports or maybe the commodity traders report that comes over from the ag stuff. Obviously, if those reports don't come out, but really the government shutdown isn't all that threat. and don't be surprised if they kick the can to March. Now, that could be bad for Kamala Harris if she wins the presidency, because then she'll have a government shutdown threat in the first 100 days of her presidency. But again, that's if and when Kamala Harris wins the presidency, and certainly that's if Speaker Mike Johnson can't pass those other seven bills. So over in the Senate, they are still here. The Senate Banking Committee is going to have a hearing on infrastructure later this week. I don't think it's really going to be any groundbreaking stuff because a lot of the infrastructure package, we may get an update on how the IRA is actually working. So I'm going to pay attention to that and see if we can get any information on how much the monies and so forth have flown from the IRA and from the IIJA. But I would also report that Politico is reporting that Senator Sherrod Brown, the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, has pushed off the vote for the FDIC chair to after the August recess. So I don't think you're going to see any votes on that. Regulatory stuff, not a ton of stuff happening out there at the moment. I honestly don't anticipate we're going to see much. We're quickly entering the August doldrums here in Washington. And so I think the only thing really of note that I would call out is tomorrow the FDIC is having an open meeting on brokered deposits, although also known as hot money. This is, essentially money that can go from bank to bank, search for higher yield. I'll have a review on that when it comes out. It's probably in the next week or so. But, if you are looking for some regulatory stuff, the one thing I would call out is really the FDIC Vice Chairman Travis Hill gave a speech last week that talked a little bit about what we could see over the next few months. He called out the proposal the Fed has been working on about having banks utilize the discount window. He talked about this hot money, this broker deposit proposal. He talked about liquidity risk. That's one of the big ticket items that I think the Fed and the FDIC and the OCC are looking to do post Basel III Endgame is liquidity risk. I'm working on a big note on that one. That should be out in the next few weeks. May get pushed back to September. And then finally, he called for a full reproposal of the Basel III Endgame, not a partial reproposal, which is what Jerome Powell was hinting at in his Senate testimony. So the last two things I want to call out. One is the Congressional Review Act deadline is still probably around August 7th, according to our friends over at Bloomberg Government. If you're not in this space, you haven't heard me talk about this before, the Congressional Review Act is the deadline where any regulation that is passed after that deadline, essentially 60 legislative days, Congress, through a majority vote in the House, the Senate, and the presidency, could overturn any type of regulation. So if the Republicans win the House, the Senate, and the presidency, they can go back 60 legislative days, not calendar days, but 60 legislative days, and overturn any regulation that's finalized after that. And the best guess, because we don't know how long Congress is going to meet in session and so forth, the best guess is around August 7th. So any regulation finalized after essentially the end of next week is now at CRA risk. And the only other thing I would just call out is in the crypto space. Obviously, President Trump spoke to the Bitcoin conference past week. We've seen reporting from Bloomberg News that Vice President Kamala Harris is potentially adopting a different view on crypto, maybe a little bit more open to it. But I would just call out that Senator Stabenow, the chairman of the Senate Ag Committee, has been floating a bill that could be out in the next week or so. Without looking at the specifics of the bill, I suspect this bill is being floated around there amongst the lobbyists. I personally can't look at it until it's out in the public forum. But what I would just state generally is that bills that come out this close to the election generally don't pass. There are more bills that are designed to tell people that they're going to be worked on in the next session. Obviously, Senator Stabenow has announced that she's going to retire at the end of this term. But I would just say generally the odds are against something coming together. I honestly think that, and if you look at our BI election matrix, we have a 30% chance of a grandiose crypto bill passing in this congressional term. Odds certainly would go higher, but I think if anything were to pass in the lame duck session, it would most likely be a stablecoin bill or something more subdued and more direct than that. So with that, I'm going to stop there. I'm going to say thank you again for attending. Please let me know if you have any questions. Next week, I'm actually going to be on holiday. My family and I are going down to South Carolina for the week, so I won't be hosting this call. I will see if one of my other colleagues can host this call. If we can't, you will not get a notification 1 hour in advance. Essentially, the call will be off, and so you won't get that reminder, so just keep in mind for that. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful week, and please let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.